Handcrafted clay pot stew, cooked underground using traditional nomadic heat techniques. Look carefully at this scene. An elderly village man kneels beside a clay oven built directly into the earth. A small fire glows beneath a handcrafted clay pot, while smoke slowly rises into the evening sky. At first glance, it looks simple, almost too simple. But what if I told you that the cooking method you're looking at is based on knowledge that has survived for thousands of years? Long before modern kitchens existed, long before electricity reached villages, and long before steel pots filled our homes, people learned something remarkable. They discovered that the earth itself could become a cooking tool. And once you understand how they did it, you'll never look at traditional village cooking the same way again. Today, we're exploring one of the most fascinating techniques ever developed by nomadic and rural communities: cooking a handcrafted clay pot stew underground using natural heat stored and controlled beneath the surface of the earth. Now here's the surprising part. This wasn't simply a way to cook food, it was a way to survive. In harsh deserts, open grasslands, mountain valleys, and remote village regions, people often traveled long distances with limited resources. Carrying heavy metal equipment wasn't practical. Fuel was precious. Every piece of wood mattered. So generation after generation developed methods that used heat more efficiently and kept food cooking for hours with minimal effort. The answer was clay. Clay was everywhere. People shaped it with their own hands, dried it in the sun, hardened it with fire, and transformed ordinary earth into cooking vessels capable of holding heat for incredible lengths of time. When combined with underground cooking pits and carefully controlled fires, these clay pots became natural slow cookers centuries before the modern world invented the term. The result? Tender meat, soft vegetables, rich broths, and flavors that slowly developed hour after hour beneath the ground. Many historians believe underground cooking traditions appeared independently in different regions of the world because the idea was so effective. Whether among desert nomads, shepherd communities, or isolated villages, people discovered that earth and fire together could create a natural oven unlike anything else. And despite all our modern technology, many traditional cooks still insist that food prepared this way tastes better. Before we continue, welcome to *** Pure Village Life Baba ***, where we explore authentic village traditions, forgotten skills, traditional cooking methods, and the wisdom passed down through generations. If you enjoy learning about real village life and ancient techniques that are slowly disappearing from the modern world, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. I always enjoy reading your comments and seeing viewers joining our village life family from around the world. Now, to truly understand this underground clay pot stew, we first need to go back thousands of years and discover how humanity's relationship with clay changed cooking forever. How clay changed human history. To understand this cooking method, we must travel back to a time when human beings were still learning how to settle, farm, and build communities. Thousands of years ago, people faced a problem that seems simple today. How do you boil water? How do you cook grains? How do you make tough meat soft enough to eat? Roasting food directly over flames worked, but it had limits. Food could burn easily. Water evaporated quickly. Valuable nutrients were often lost. Early communities needed a better solution. The answer was lying beneath their feet: earth. More specifically, clay. At some point in history, people discovered that certain types of soil could be shaped when wet and hardened when exposed to fire. What began as a simple experiment gradually transformed daily life. Clay vessels allowed people to carry water, store grain, preserve food, and most importantly, cook meals slowly and efficiently. Archaeologists have uncovered clay cooking vessels dating back thousands of years across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. While these cultures lived far apart, many arrived at a similar conclusion: clay was one of nature's greatest gifts. Why? Because clay absorbs heat gradually and releases it slowly. This means food cooks evenly instead of being exposed to harsh direct flames. Modern chefs call this heat retention. Ancient villagers simply called it good cooking. As communities grew, cooking techniques became more advanced. People began building earth ovens, underground pits, and clay-lined chambers capable of holding heat for many hours. Nomadic groups adapted these ideas to fit their traveling lifestyles, creating temporary cooking systems that could be built almost anywhere. Imagine a group of travelers crossing dry lands centuries ago. As evening approached, they would stop near a suitable location. A shallow pit would be prepared. Firewood would be gathered. Stones might be heated. Clay pots would be filled with whatever ingredients were available that season. Perhaps goat meat, perhaps lamb, perhaps wild herbs gathered during the journey. Maybe onions, lentils, roots, or grains. Nothing was wasted. Everything had value. The meal would then be placed where the stored heat could work slowly through the night. While families rested, the earth continued cooking. No rushing, no constant stirring, no complicated equipment, only time, heat, and patience. And perhaps that is one reason these meals became so memorable. The process itself reflected village life. People were not racing against the clock. They worked with nature rather than against it. Today, when we hear the phrase slow food, it sounds modern. Yet village communities understood this principle generations before the term existed. The underground clay pot stew we're exploring today is part of that long tradition. A tradition built on observation, experience, and knowledge passed from elders to younger generations around evening fires. But how exactly does underground cooking work? Why doesn't the food burn? And how can a simple clay structure hold enough heat to cook an entire meal? The answer lies in the remarkable science hidden within this ancient technique. And that's where our story becomes even more fascinating. The hidden science beneath the earth. At first, underground cooking might seem like a mystery. After all, how can food cook properly when it's buried beneath the ground? The answer is surprisingly simple, and it shows just how intelligent traditional village communities were. When a fire burns inside a clay-lined pit or earth oven, the surrounding clay, stones, and soil absorb enormous amounts of heat. Unlike open flames, which lose much of their energy into the air, underground structures trap that heat and hold it for a very long time. Think of it this way. If you touch a stone that has been sitting in the sun all day, it often remains warm long after sunset. Underground cooking uses the same principle, but on a much larger scale. The earth becomes a natural heat battery. Once enough heat is stored, the fire can be reduced or removed entirely. The retained heat continues cooking the food slowly and evenly from all sides. This is where the clay pot becomes essential. A handcrafted clay pot doesn't simply hold the ingredients. It acts as a protective chamber. Moisture remains trapped inside. Natural juices cannot escape easily. Steam circulates through the pot, gently tenderizing every ingredient. This is why traditional clay pot stews often become incredibly rich and flavorful. Every drop of moisture matters. Every herb contributes its aroma. Every ingredient slowly shares its flavor with the others. Nothing is rushed, and that patience creates something extraordinary. In many traditional communities, preparing such a meal was never a one-person task. It was a family activity. Children gathered small pieces of wood, older family members prepared vegetables. Elders often supervised the fire because they understood exactly how much heat was needed. Knowledge was not written in books. It was passed from generation to generation. A grandfather teaching his grandson, a grandmother teaching her granddaughter. A lesson learned through observation, practice, and experience. One mistake could ruin a meal. Too much heat and the food could dry out. Too little heat and it would not cook properly. Finding the balance required skill, and this skill became part of a family's heritage. Across deserts, grasslands, and mountain villages, similar traditions emerged. Different ingredients were used depending on the region, but the basic principle remained remarkably consistent. Use the earth's ability to store heat and allow time to do the rest. What makes this even more impressive is that these methods were developed without thermometers, timers, or scientific instruments, yet many experienced village cooks could judge temperature simply by observing the color of hot stones, the behavior of smoke, or the feel of warmth near the oven. That level of understanding came only from years of experience. Today, many modern chefs are rediscovering these ancient techniques. Restaurants around the world experiment with earth ovens, clay cooking vessels, and slow cooking methods inspired by traditional cultures. But for village communities, this was never a culinary trend. It was everyday life. It was practical. It was economical. And it produced meals capable of feeding entire families after long days of work. Now that we understand the science behind the technique, it's time to prepare the stew itself. We'll begin with the ingredients that traditional nomadic families often relied upon. Simple foods, humble foods, yet foods capable of creating remarkable flavors when combined with patience, earth, fire, and a handcrafted clay pot. Preparing the traditional clay pot stew. Now comes the part everyone has been waiting for. The meal itself. One of the greatest misconceptions about traditional village food is that it required rare ingredients. In reality, most rural families cooked with whatever was available locally and seasonally. The secret was never expensive ingredients. The secret was technique. A nomadic family traveling across dry lands might prepare this stew using lamb, goat meat, or whatever livestock was available. Village communities often added onions, garlic, carrots, turnips, lentils, beans, or wild herbs collected nearby. Every region had its own version. Every family had its own recipe, but the spirit remained the same. Use what nature provides. Waste nothing. Cook with patience. Imagine an experienced village elder beginning the preparation. First, the clay pot is carefully inspected. Traditional handcrafted pots were valuable possessions. Some remained in families for many years. Small cracks could affect cooking performance, so experienced cooks always checked their vessels before use. Next come the ingredients. Fresh onions are sliced and placed at the bottom, not only for flavor. They also help protect the meat from direct heat. Then comes the meat, large pieces rather than small ones. Why? Because slow underground cooking favors larger cuts. During the long cooking process, the connective tissues gradually soften, creating meat that becomes tender enough to pull apart with almost no effort. Over the meat go vegetables and herbs, perhaps carrots, perhaps turnips, perhaps local greens gathered from nearby fields. Then a small amount of water or broth is added, not much. Remember, the clay pot traps moisture. As the ingredients cook, natural juices are released. Steam forms inside the sealed vessel, creating a rich cooking environment. Finally, the lid is secured. In some traditional communities, a simple clay or dough seal was placed around the edge. This helped keep valuable steam from escaping during the long cooking process. Now the pot is ready, but the underground oven is not. Nearby, a carefully managed fire has been burning for hours. This is a detail many people overlook. The meal itself may take several hours to cook, but preparing the underground heat source often requires just as much patience. Wood burns, stones heat up, clay walls absorb energy, the earth stores warmth. Everything must reach the proper temperature before the clay pot is lowered into place. This stage separates experienced cooks from beginners. Village elders often judged readiness without modern tools. They watched the fire. They observed the color of the embers. They felt the heat radiating from the oven. Years of experience had trained them to recognize the perfect moment. When that moment arrived, the clay pot was carefully placed inside. The opening was partially covered. The heat was trapped. And then came perhaps the most important ingredient of all, time. Hours would pass. Families would continue their daily activities. Animals would be tended. Children would play. Stories would be shared. Meanwhile, beneath the earth, something remarkable was happening. The stew was slowly transforming, tough meat becoming tender, vegetables absorbing rich flavors, broth growing deeper and more aromatic with every passing hour. No rushing, no shortcuts, only the steady work of earth, fire, clay, and patience. And when the moment finally arrived to open the underground oven, the results were often unforgettable. But before we reveal what happened when the lid was lifted, there's another fascinating part of this story: how underground cooking became woven into the social life, traditions, and cultural identity of village communities across generations. More than a meal, a tradition that brought people together. For many village and nomadic communities, underground clay pot cooking was never only about food, it was about people. In today's fast-moving world, meals are often rushed. People eat while working, driving, scrolling through phones, or watching screens. But in traditional villages, preparing a meal was often one of the most important social events of the day. When a clay pot stew was placed underground, everyone knew it would take hours before it was ready. And during those hours, life happened. Families gathered, neighbors stopped by, children played nearby, elders shared stories from the past, young people listened and learned. The cooking process became a natural gathering point. Around the world, village communities developed traditions centered around slow-cooked meals. While ingredients differed from one region to another, the idea was remarkably similar. Food had the power to unite people: a shepherd returning after a long day in the fields, a traveler arriving from a distant settlement, a relative visiting after many months away. Everyone was welcome around the meal, and perhaps that's why traditional cooking methods survived for so long. They weren't merely efficient, they strengthened communities. Many oral histories describe families sitting near the cooking site as the evening sky darkened. Children would ask questions. Grandparents would tell stories about difficult winters, long journeys, harvest seasons, and lessons learned throughout life. Knowledge moved from one generation to the next, not in classrooms, not through books, but through conversation. A meal became a classroom. The fire became a gathering place. The clay pot became a symbol of continuity. In some regions, special occasions called for larger underground feasts. Weddings, seasonal celebrations, harvest festivals, and important family gatherings often featured slow-cooked dishes prepared using earth ovens or underground heat techniques. People understood something that modern society sometimes forgets: good food takes time. Strong communities take time, and meaningful traditions take time. Perhaps that is one reason these ancient methods continue to inspire people today. They remind us of a slower rhythm of life, one connected to nature, family, and shared experiences. As the hours pass, anticipation begins to grow. The aroma slowly escapes from tiny openings in the earth. Children notice it first, then the adults. Conversations pause. Heads turn toward the underground oven. Everyone knows the moment is approaching. The stew has been cooking for hours. The clay pot has done its work. The earth has done its work. The fire has done its work. Now comes the reward. The moment every traditional cook waits for, the opening of the clay pot. And what happens next explains why generations continued using this remarkable technique long after other cooking methods became available. The moment the clay pot is opened. After hours of waiting, the time finally arrives. The embers have cooled. The earth has held its warmth. The underground oven has quietly done its job. Now everyone gathers closer. The cover is carefully removed. A small cloud of steam rises into the evening air. For a moment, nobody speaks. Then comes the aroma, rich, deep, earthy. The scent of slow-cooked meat, vegetables, herbs, and broth fills the surrounding space. It is the kind of aroma that immediately tells you something special has happened. An experienced elder reaches for the clay lid. Slowly, carefully, he lifts it. Inside, the transformation is complete. The meat that entered the pot firm and tough now falls apart with the gentlest touch. Vegetables have absorbed the broth and become tender without losing their shape. Every ingredient has shared its flavor with every other ingredient. Nothing dominates. Everything works together. This is one of the reasons traditional clay pot stews became so respected. The cooking method creates harmony, not only among people gathered around the meal, but among the ingredients themselves. The first serving is often given to the oldest family member or honored guest. In many traditional communities, respect for elders was expressed through small actions like these. Then bowls begin to fill. Children wait eagerly. Adults smile. Travelers are welcomed. Neighbors are invited, and the meal begins. What makes this scene remarkable is that it has repeated itself for centuries. Different languages, different cultures, different landscapes, yet the experience remains familiar. People gathering around food prepared with care. Food prepared not for speed, but for nourishment. Not for profit, but for community. Today, many people searching for authentic experiences are rediscovering traditional cooking methods. They are learning that some of the most valuable knowledge developed by our ancestors was never written down. It was preserved through practice. A village elder teaching a child, a family passing down a recipe, a community preserving a tradition. And in a world filled with constant change, these simple acts become increasingly important. The handcrafted clay pot stew cooked underground is more than an old recipe. It is a reminder that wisdom can be found in simple things, a reminder that patience often produces the best results, and a reminder that some traditions survive because they continue to bring value generation after generation. If you've stayed with me until this point, you've now witnessed one of humanity's oldest and most fascinating cooking traditions, a method shaped by earth, fire, clay, and time. And perhaps the next time you see a simple clay pot, you'll remember that it represents thousands of years of knowledge, creativity, and survival. Thank you for spending this time with us on *** Pure Village Life Baba ***. If you enjoyed this journey into traditional village cooking and ancient nomadic techniques, please support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing it with friends who appreciate authentic village life and forgotten traditions. I would also love to hear from you. ***, which country are you watching from? And have you ever seen a traditional underground cooking method in your region? Leave your answer in the comments below. Until next time, take care, stay connected to nature, and keep exploring the wisdom of traditional village life.